But that was the answer I got, and it served its purpose. Okay, why not me? This is it. This is the way it is. I guess I just have to take it a day at a time, and do my best to get better, and see where I end up. And when I get to that point, I'll make decisions about what I'm going to do for the future, which I did. I had a lot of vocational counseling from the VA when I got flushed, out of the service and out of the VA system. I got a lot of, like I said, vocational counseling. I got interest tests that I take, because the question now is, okay, what am I going to do for the rest of my life? Well, not surprisingly, I scored highest on military officer. Hoorah! Gee, I just was one of those a couple of months ago. Second highest was FBI agent. Oh, that sounds good, but again, they don't have job descriptions for guys who limp, And finally, I scored third on teacher. I said, well, that's interesting. And that evolved into thinking about becoming a therapist, and specifically a speech therapist. I had a speech defect that I just kind of overcame myself at Bethesda by slowing down and trying to think about what I was going to say before I said it. And I got the nickname Spock because my speech became very deliberate. But when I was just spontaneous, apparently, and I never heard this, but my roommate would say, Eisenbach. I said, what? He said, what was with that language? I said, what language? We maybe had some visitors, a couple of gals from people I knew who were overseas in Vietnam. He said, it was terrible. It was filthy. I'd say, really? I never heard it. And he said, yeah. So I started to slow down myself and try to think about what I would say. But speech therapist kind of stuck in my mind after this vocational counseling that I got, and that's eventually what I became, was a speech language pathologist.
So when he's saying your speech was filthy, you mean you were like swearing?
Oh yeah. Oh. Yeah, just using every filthy word.
like what's that, Tourette syndrome? Is that what it's called?
Yeah,
like a Tourette syndrome scenario.
And I had no idea that I was doing that. I didn't hear it.
Because you just did it naturally, like that's how you talked, kind of thing, or like why didn't you remember it?
No, it wasn't how I normally would speak. It would just come out in totally inappropriate situations. Not amongst the guys, but amongst visitors. And like I said, I didn't know what was going on. But
you kind of glanced over the fact that you got the feedback, hey, you can't stay in the Marine Corps anymore, and it sounds like you figured that out yourself, but at some point that's got to turn into a harsh reality where that's what you wanted to do. Right, you're in Vietnam, you're a platoon commander, you got the best guys in the world, and all of a sudden in one day it's gone.
It's right, it's gone, and you don't know what's going to replace it. But yeah, eventually you get before a physical evaluation board, and what I had hoped for, because most of my roommates and most of the guys there I knew that had Marines, they had orthopedic injuries. They'd gotten stitched up with a machine gun in their legs or whatever. They got put on the temporary disabled retired list. That allowed you 5 years to regain your ability. And if you could, you would get a chance to go back into the Marine Corps. On the other hand, if you got better, the VA could drop your disability rating down. So it was kind of a double-edged sword. Most guys just wanted to get out, but for guys like me that they call lifers, because I wanted a career in it, and I argued that I could fly any desk. Well, that was fine, but that wasn't gonna fly. I was going to be retired, but as long as I was on the TDRL, the temporary disabled retired list, I thought, well, I got a chance. But I'm at the VA hospital now. I've been through my physical evaluation board. They've asked me questions, and I've got a transcript of it. My doctor submitted statements and stuff like that. And they said, well, we'll get you on the TDRO. And I said, great, because I'd have 5 years to work myself back in the Corps. Came through, my orders for retirement orders came through one day, and when I was in the VA hospital, permanent disabled retired list. No chance of ever getting back. Boy, I was pissed beyond just talking about it. I was on the phone to the Secretary of Navy's office, which I got through to, and I had some nice older woman right there who obviously had heard this story before. I was promised the TDRL, but I've been permanently retired. She said, well, Lieutenant, you've got to understand that, we've done this a few times before, and we kind of know the history of these kinds of injuries. And your board did recommend the permanent retired disabled list, not the temporary. So, we have to go with what they say. And, of course, they were right. But, again, I was, by now I'm old man at 24, right? And I'm being retired. Excuse me. That's not the plan. But that's how it all worked.
How long did it take you to realize, how long did it take you to accept that? So you kind of got through the why me, why not me?
Right.
How long did it take you to get through this fact that, okay, now the Marine Corps, your sacred Marine Corps has made this decision?
I'm still thinking about that, Jocko, to tell you the truth.
So 50-odd years.
That's right. Yeah, now I got a new why me question here. But no, I adjusted. I went down to graduate school, got a master's degree in the speech department at the University of Florida, and they weren't quite sure what had walked through the door when I arrived. I wanted to know where the coffee mess was. And they're all looking at me like, the what? Well, the place where you just drop in the morning, get a cup of coffee, pay a dime or whatever. Well, we don't have anything like that. Well, we're going to get one.
We do now.
We do now, that's right. And most of my classes were on the third floor of this building, which had an elevator that went up to the third floor, but it didn't work, hadn't worked in years. And so I went to my advisor. I said, look, this 3 flights of stairs is killing me 2 and 3 times a day. We got to get that elevator working. I said, oh, can't do it, Ike. No way. Hasn't worked since I've been here, the prof said. I said, well, we'll see about that. He said, well, what are you going to do? I said, well, I'm going to go talk to the president. The president? What president? The president of the university. He said, you can't do that. I said, really? Watch me. So I did. He wasn't there, but his chief of staff was, who happened to be a guy who had kind of an arm injury from World War II. And he said, oh, it can't be repaired, can it? I said, well, that's what they're telling me, sir. He said, I'll take care of it. Well, the next day it was working just fine and worked for the next 3 years during my master's program. Didn't have a down day.
How we kind of jumped over this part. How long were you in Bethesda for total?
I was in Bethesda for a little over 12 months.
And throughout that time, when you showed up, when you got wounded, you couldn't move your legs or arm. What was the progression like getting you back to the best state that you got to?
Yeah. Well, it was physical therapy, occupational therapy, once a day, which I decided if once a day was good, twice might be better. So I argued for that, and pretty soon I got that. By November, my right leg had started to get remarkably better. My left leg still wasn't real useful, but you put a brace on it, and I could, by November, I was walking. Now, granted, I had a crutch on one side, on the right side, a loft-strand crutch, the metal things we called polio crutches back then, but I don't know what they're typical. I think I call them loft-strand crutches because that's the guy who invented it. And a Corman on my left side, but I was walking, And, of course, I went back to, I finally dropped the Corman and went to 2 loft-strand crutches, dropped the left one after a while, back to the right one, then dropped that to a cane and a leg brace on my left, and I did fine for about 42 years that way. And about 8 years ago, my right leg decided to take an early retirement on me, and so I had to start wearing a brace on that leg, and I was falling too much, so they put me into an electric wheelchair, which is what I scoot around the house and around town in. That scooter over there is what it flies. My wheelchair doesn't fly. It's 247 pounds, and it doesn't fly. But that flies. That breaks down into 4 or 5 parts, and my wife can do it usually by her own. Of course, this weekend we've had the kids to help her. Just throw it in the back of a...
I know some of the notes...
Off we go.
Speaking of you falling down, some of the notes had you wearing a football helmet while you were down there. It sounded like that made quite an impact on some of the places that you'd visit with your football helmet on. And
well, I was falling when I started, walk independently at the hospital. I had a left foot drop, which means the brace was supposed to bring it up, so it clears all the little obstacles that you don't ever pay attention to when you got 2 good feet. But I would fall into elevators because they wouldn't be exactly aligned, and I'd fall into everybody in there. So eventually I started. They say you need a football helmet.
Yeah, because you got the wounds.
Right. I've got a defect up there. You could put your hand in my defect and take my pulse just like this. If I squeezed hard, the thing would pop up.
But when did you get a titanium plate in there?
Oh, that was after about a year. At the end of my year, they waited a year before they put a plate in your skull because it was considered a contaminated wound. I'm not sure what that meant to the medical people, but to me it meant you waited a year and put the plate in. But so this football helmet, my dad got it from the University of Delaware where he worked, and it was blue with like a Michigan thing with yellow stripes. So in occupational therapy, I got a can of olive draft paint, and they'd make me do everything with my left hand. I spray painted this thing olive draft. My roommate at the time, he had been there longer than I had, and apparently I was the perfect roommate for him because I had lost my sense of smell and taste, and apparently he'd been in a body spica cast from here down to his knees for like 6 months, and he stunk to high heaven. So, and I didn't smell him, so I was apparently the perfect. His sister got this button book where you had a blank button and a bunch of things you could put on the button, but it also had some bullet holes with the shattered glass type things. So I put one of those on the front of the football helmet, and I had a little badge, maybe 3 inches around, said my head is a depressed area. Said, and I'd wear that on my bathrobe around the hospital. People would stop and look at me, and they'd read that, and they'd look at me, and they'd go, oh. And they kind of move out of the way. They didn't want to mess with this guy. He might have been crazy.
Dark humor is popular in our family.
Yeah, dark humor, at Bethesda at that time, there was probably always about a dozen of us young lieutenants, between the 8th floor and the 14th floor of the, what they call it, Roosevelt's erection, the tower at Bethesda. Anyway, and we didn't know it at the time, but we had a great group dynamic going on. There was always someone who was worse off than you. So when you started to feel sorry for yourself or started to get down, your buddies would come in and say, hey, what about Eisenbach over there? Or what about Vitucci over here? Or so-and-so, Smitty. Mm-hmm. And sure enough, there was always somebody better off than you was putting up the good fight. So, you never got too down on yourself.
No, those are important lessons for life, right there.
You bet.
I mean, we can complain. I'll be the person complaining about I jammed my finger and I'm all mad about it because I can't do something. It's like, no, what you need to do is be quiet, and as I always say, do what you can.
Sure.
What you can. So you get down. So now we'll go back to college. You got the elevator working. You got and how long does it take? How long does it take to get your doctorate? What'd you get your doctorate in?
I got my doctorate in speech language pathology, with a minor in psychology. But at first I had to get the master's, and I'm not sure how the University of Florida looked at my transcript from the Naval Academy and how they factored in, weapons and navigation and courses like that I took. But I had to do a whole lot of undergraduate courses before I could, move into the graduate level courses. So it took me, I think, about 3 years to get the master's degree, going to school full time. And the VA was, picking up the tab for that. VA has been very good to me, very good. And I know there's a lot of complaints out there about the VA, and I'm sure some of them are warranted to some degree or another. But you've got to understand with the VA, it doesn't happen yesterday. It doesn't happen 5 minutes from now. It'll happen down the road. But as long as you check every box and go from A, B, C, D instead of trying to jump from A to F, it'll all work for you. Mm-hmm. Great outfit.
At what point did you meet Sherry?
I met Sherry after I had my master's degree. I worked for a year down in Orlando at an Easter Seals community, and it was a great experience. One of my old profs at the University of Florida invited me to come back up to the medical center there and become one of the staff speech pathologists at the medical center. And I said, great, so I did that. Sherry was a staff occupational therapist, had an office kind of across the hall from me. We met, and being dull normal about these things, like most men apparently, I didn't catch on fast enough. So we had a mutual friend who was the other master speech pathologist there, and she had us over for dinner one night. Great. And I still didn't get it. So we were at a convention one summer, and we were